Of most flights opens a window of opportunity for Qantas to permanently cut costs, but the airline denies it's taking advantage of a loophole to outsource during the pandemic. Stephanie Chalmers reports.
Nick Bennett fears he's about to have a lot more time on his hands.
I've loved working for Qantas. It's been the best 21 years of my life. I am sort of waiting round, turning up for work, and it's like waiting for the axe to fall. I know it's going to fall, but it's just a matter of when.
2/3 of his team responsible for pushing back and positioning aircraft were made redundant. He decided to stay on, but now his livelihood could be gone anyway.
It's an absolute huge mental strain on me and my fellow workers who are there now, and it's very sad.
Elif Chilik has spent more than 7 years at Qantas, cleaning and preparing cabins between flights, but that could soon be over.
I've actually never thought that we would come to this stage very quickly and due to COVID.
The airline wants to outsource ground operations, including baggage handling and cabin cleaning, at 11 Australian airports where it's currently done in-house. Qantas says it could save $100 million a year and avoid $80 million in spending on equipment over the next 5 years. But that means up to 2,500 jobs would go, on top of the 6,000 redundancies announced in June.
Sack Alan Joyce! Sack Alan Joyce!
Just because Alan Joyce makes a pronouncement, it doesn't mean that it's what the Australian community should do.
Michael Caine says it's a decision taken under the cover of COVID.
Why has the decision been made now when JobKeeper's available? Why has the decision been made just after 6,000 redundancies were announced? Why has the decision been made when this work still needs to be done?
If it goes ahead, the work will be picked up by specialty ground services firms. The TWU has concerns about the conditions and insecure work at these providers. Under the Fair Work Act, there are some protections for workers who change from one company to another after outsourcing.
Suppose Company A wants to outsource some work to Company B. If Company B takes over the staff who used to do that work for Company A, then they also have to observe any terms and conditions which had been negotiated for Company A's workers.
But there's a time limit.
If there's longer than a 3-month gap, then there isn't a transfer of business, and the new employer is not obliged to observe the same terms and conditions.
Normally, the work never stops at the country's largest airports, but international travel is grounded and domestic schedules are dramatically reduced, as is the workload for ground workers. And that's created a chance for Qantas to outsource, without existing employees having to transfer within 3 months, and a new contractor having to pick up the same tab for workers' wages and conditions. Qantas says it's not using the pandemic shutdown as an opportunity to outsource, but it does admit there is now excess capacity within the companies this work could be outsourced to, saying the industry does not expect air travel to return to pre-COVID levels for another 3 or 4 years. Elif Chilik is anxious about what her future holds.
Qantas is where I wanted to be, and when I joined in to stay.
Nick Bennett is worried about future generations.
If the company does this, other companies will follow suit, and we're sort of test dummies.
The unions have taken Qantas to the Fair Work Commission and say they will pursue other legal options. But for now, it's limbo.
Embattled wealth manager AMP is embarking on a round of redundancies across the business as it moves to cut costs and find efficiencies. Support roles in AMP Capital and the main AMP business will be combined. The company says it can't put a figure on the numbers to go. The Financial Services Union says that's either a mistruth or statement of incompetence. In a letter leaked by employees to the media, CEO Francesco Di Ferrari said the cuts were part of his strategy to streamline the business. One of New South Wales's most controversial energy projects, Santos's $3.6 billion Narrabri coal seam gas field, has been approved. The company said its proposal for 850 gas wells will bring down gas prices. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull rubbishes that claim. Mr Turnbull told Elise Morgan cheap energy must be a key plank of the government's budget plans if it wants a manufacturing bonanza.
The point that I've made about Narrabri is that while it will increase the supply of gas in New South Wales, it is not cheap gas, as AGL has said. The cost of extraction alone is about $6.40 a gigajoule, and so by the time that gets to a customer, be it a power generator or a manufacturer, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be more than that, obviously. So the global recession we're going through at the moment has obviously seen oil and gas come down in price, but gas companies are not going to open up and operate fields if they are operating them at a loss, at least not for any sustainable period.
So do you think in time that this asset may become stranded? I mean, given the cost of renewables coming right down, that's the future of investment, particularly for most of the energy companies, and there is other gas available on the East Coast.
In terms of generating electricity, there is no question that gas is going to become more and more challenged by alternative means of providing peaking power, namely batteries and, of course, pumped hydro.
Santos could potentially put more gas into its export terminal because of this opening up of Narrabri. Do you think that this needs to be closely watched, given that the whole point of getting projects like this up is to get more gas into the system and keep a lid on prices?
Well, yes, of course, the market should be closely watched. But look, the big issue looking longer term is firstly that there isn't gas that is cheap enough to credibly found a sort of new industrial bonanza driven by gas. I mean, gas is an expensive fuel in Australia, and it is an expensive relative, particularly to the alternatives for energy generation of renewables plus storage.
An industrial or manufacturing bonanza is what the government is hoping will spur the economy out of the recession. So what do they need to put in the budget next week to make that happen?
Well, at least if you want to have an abundance of cheap energy in Australia, we have the opportunity to do that with renewables. Now, renewables used to be more expensive than fossil fuel-fired energy. That is no longer the case. Technology has addressed that.
So what could the government possibly put in the budget, or is this down to the fabled stable federal energy policy, which quite frankly we're never going to get? But what can the feds put in the budget next week?
Well, I think in fast-tracking transmission, again, there's been some good progress made there. Fast-tracking projects that are naturally within the ambit of government, like Snowy 2.0, which I'm sure will be followed by Snowy 3.0 and 4.0 in the years ahead. The Battery of the Nation, pumped hydro projects in Tasmania, again, an initiative of my government, that is that they too need to be given support. But, the important thing is that we know what the trend, everybody knows that. The only thing that is holding us up is politics.
Australia's economy boomed out of the last economic calamity, the global financial crisis, largely thanks to China's demand for resources. It'll be handy for that to happen again, and so far, it's looking good. Strong demand from China has helped drive iron ore prices higher, and Australia's miners have been shipping record volumes. Stephanie Chalmers examines if the boom will last.
There's no digging the budget out of its COVID black hole, but Australia's iron ore miners did their best.
Most of the news on the economy and for the budget has been bad news, but the better than expected iron ore prices do represent a little bit of good news for the economy and for the budget.
The pandemic has created a series of unfortunate events that have been good for the fortunes of Australia's largest export. As Australia and other countries entered recession, China started to claw its way out.
We've seen China come out of COVID-19 implementing significant stimulus, particularly infrastructure, which accounts for about 20 to 25% of final steel consumption.
At the same time, Australia's closest rival when it comes to iron ore production, Brazil, has faced major disruptions.
Part of that is COVID-19 related, bad weather, but some of the issues lingering from last year when we saw a fatal dam collapse have also been a driver.
All that's converged to push iron ore prices up nearly 30% since the start of the year, peaking a few weeks ago around $130 a tonne. The high price, along with increased export volumes, saw iron ore become the first commodity to earn Australia more than $100 billion in a single year. The recent company reporting season saw many sectors battered by the downturn and propped up by government subsidies. But iron ore miner Fortescue posted a record profit, and the commodity also helped cushion profit falls at BHP and Rio Tinto, as the miners stepped in to fill the supply hole left by Brazil.
If iron ore prices were to remain at this elevated level, you could expect to see a boost to government tax receipts of anywhere between $5 billion to $15 billion in 2021.
But that will make little headway on the budget blowout. Deloitte is forecasting a deficit of just below $200 billion for the current financial year. The government isn't banking on a continued iron ore boom either. While it expects export volumes to hold up around current levels, it thinks the earnings from those exports will drop from $102 billion in the past financial year to $80 billion by mid-2022. Prices are also expected to fall as Brazil starts to ramp up.
We're expecting iron ore prices to average about $110 a tonne in the December quarter. And we expect that to gradually decline to about $90 a tonne by the end of next year. We're seeing a noticeable improvement in Brazil's iron ore exports in the second half of this year. And so we expect that recovery to also play into lower iron ore prices over the next 12 months.
But still a relatively bright spot in a dark time for the economy.
Taking a look at the Australian share market, which was rattled on Friday by news Donald Trump had tested positive for COVID-19. After recouping some of its early losses during the session, the ASX 200 took a tumble on the news out of the US. For the week, the ASX ended down almost 3%, while the All Ordinaries fell back below 6,000 points. And that's all from Close of Business. For more on those stories, including full coverage and analysis ahead of the budget, go to our website and catch The Business Monday to Thursday evenings at 8:45 Eastern on the ABC News channel and after the late news on ABC TV. I'm Rachel Papazoni. Thanks for watching.
We didn't know if it was a strike, it was a bomb, is anyone bombing us?
For 2 minutes, it was silence.
I was just screaming, my baby, help my baby.
They allowed this to happen.
It became normal to see people in this part of the world suffering. It's not okay.
Whether it's by negligence or evil, both cases, they are completely guilty.
Four Corners, Monday, ABC and iView.
In this land of extremes,
I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime.
Craig Rucastle brings us an essential guide for survival.
This series will show you what we can all do to be more prepared when big weather comes.
Big Weather starts Tuesday, October 13.
If someone asks me who I am and what I do, I'd say I'm a delegator, I'm a mechanic, butcher, a leader, a mentor.
Get off and grab him, Joe!
I'm a ringer and I catch balls.
You can make a lot of money. You can lose a fair bit pretty quick too.
Shut that gate!
You get hurt very often.
Those fears become even more intensified when it's your wife working alongside you.
What can go wrong will go wrong.
Wait, coffee!
It's a hell of a job.
Outback Ringer starts Tuesday, October 20 on ABC and iView.
World leaders send messages of support to Donald Trump and his wife, who've tested positive for COVID-19. The WA Premier fends off claims of unlawful protectionism in keeping the border shut. And the